What's up guys, it's Hyper here with another video, and today's video is going to be the Poor Man's Thrain in Summoner's War. Alright guys, so on the screen is the Poor Man's Order of Value list, or kind of the tier list. So tier 1 is LD Nat 5s, tier 2 is regular Nat 5s, LD Nat 4s, tier 3 is regular Nat 4s and LD Nat 3s, and tier 4 is regular Nat 3s and LD Nat 2s. So the reason I bring this up is because in order for a monster to be a poor man's version of another monster, it must be from a lower tier. So for example, if the regular monster is tier 2, then the poor man's version must be either tier 3 or tier 4. So the poor man's version must be from a lower tier. To be a valid poor man's version, the monster also must be a good replacement for the monster, so you can use it kind of in the same way and they're kind of similar monsters. So that is kind of the definition of poor man's. So let's go ahead and get into this video, guys. So first I will explain Thrain, so his skills and where and how people use him, and then I'll explain the poor man's version and I'll explain how it is used. So Thrain's first skill, Grim Scythe, reaps the life of the enemy with a deadly scythe, acquires additional turn if the enemy dies. Second skill is Plague. Spreads a plague to all enemies with an 80% chance to inflict 2 dots that last for 2 turns. Now, if the skill is max skilled, this will go to 100% chance to put the dots on and it'll go down to a 3-turn cooldown. Thrain's third skill. Meteorites of Doomsday fall on the enemy and the inflicted damage increases with time. Stuns the enemy for 1 turn if the enemy is under continuous damage. So the way this skill works is it attacks 5 times to random targets, and if that enemy has a dot on them, then it'll stun them. So it's not necessarily an AoE stun, it's just random targets, so it technically can be AoE. It can get all 5 people, but it could technically all go onto one enemy too. It just depends on RNG. Now this skill, max skilled, will go down to a 4-turn cooldown. So to recap, it just does a regular attack here, it does 2 dots here, and it does a not AoE stun but a random target stun. So now I'll explain how Thrain is used. So Thrain is basically just a ToA monster. He's especially popular in ToA hard, but he can be used in ToA normal too. The reason he's so popular in ToA and ToA hard especially is because he brings dots and stun to the table, and those are some of the most important debuffs in ToA hard, because eventually the ToA hard monsters become so tanky that anything besides dots isn't going to do that much damage, so people end up a lot of times just using dots and keeping them stunned and speed debuffed, and just killing them with dots and keeping them stunned because they also do so much damage and they don't want to kill them. So people will build stun lock teams and stuff like that and just dot them to death and make sure they don't get a turn so your guys don't die. So that's why he's so good in ToA hard, is because of these dots that come back so fast. And the thing about him is you don't really have to worry about his stats other than really speed and then of course accuracy. And you can violence set so he gets these skills back even faster, so he puts even more dots on and he has the chance to stun them too. So that is a basic rundown of Thrain. So now I will go over the poor man's version of Thrain. So the poor man's version of Thrain is Hemos the Water Grim Reaper. Hemos is a valid poor man's monster because, as you can see, Hemos is a tier 4 monster and Thrain is a tier 3 monster. Hemos is also very similar to Thrain, and I'll explain that now. So they have the exact same first skill, so that's already pretty similar. They also have the exact same second skill, Plague. Every 3 turns you can put 2 dots on with a 100% chance. The only difference between the two is the element and the third skill. Hemos' third skill decreases the enemy attack speed for 3 turns and freezes the enemy for 1 turn. So although people sometimes argue that Thrain's third skill is way better than Hemos's, it's really not that much better. It is better, of course. I mean, that's why this is the poor man's version. So if you have Thrain, he's probably better than Hemos, but I'll tell you why Hemos is not really that far from Thrain. So the speed debuff here is kind of useless because in the ToA hard team you will be using, you should have an AoE speed debuffer. So this is good for like desperate measures or the last call in case your speed debuffer gets resisted. But you should really have a Spectra or Arya or something that will AoE speed debuff them right away and keep the speed debuff on them almost the whole game. So the speed debuff here won't be too relevant. The freeze for 1 turn is consistent because you can choose who it freezes. You can choose one person and just freeze them. Whereas Thrain's is completely random and it just attacks random targets, so you don't really have much control over it. But it is better because it can stun up to 5 people, whereas this will stun 1. Thrain will stun at least 1, assuming it doesn't get resisted. Now another thing people might think is that Thrain is better because he's dark, so the dots will land on everyone, whereas Hemos will get resisted if he tries to dot wind monsters. That's not true because Plague is a harmless attack. It doesn't actually hit the enemies. It's kind of like Galleon's Time to Loot. It's harmless, so it'll land the dots regardless of element as long as it doesn't get resisted. Now that's not the case for this third skill. So if you try and freeze a wind monster, there's a good chance you'll glance and won't get the freeze. whereas Thrain is dark, so that third skill should land the stuns as long as it doesn't get resisted. Another thing people will say that is different between the two is that Thrain has a little better base HP. But the way ToA teams work, especially with Thrain and kind of dot teams, is that won't really matter. Because like I said, you don't want them to get turns anyways, because if they get turns, you're probably going to die anyways because they start hitting so hard. You need to keep them stunned and just kill them with dots. So overall, Hemos is a very, very good replacement for Thrain. So if you don't have a Thrain, Hemos will do the job fine in a ToA team. He has the same first skill, but the first skills on both of them won't really be doing too much. It won't do much damage. You're mainly using him for these dots. The dots are the same exact skill as Thrain. Thrain just has the random target stun instead of a single target stun. So yes, Thrain is a little better because he has the chance to stun up to all 5 enemies, whereas Hemos is restricted to only freezing 1 enemy. So yes, Thrain's third skill is a little better than Hemos because it has the ability to stun more, as well as Thrain's a dark monster, so there's much less chance to glance. But other than those, they're really, really close, and you'll use them in the same way. So that is why Hemos is the poor man's Thrain, because he's easier to get, he's a tier 4 monster, and Thrain is a tier 3 monster. You can use him in basically the exact same way. Thrain just has a little bit better of a stun, but it's really not a big difference between them, and that's why Hemos is the poor man's Thrain. So anyways guys, I think that is going to wrap up this video. If you have any other questions, comments, or concerns, leave those in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.